10. It's me again with another tutorial. So this week we're going to be looking at Act 2, Scene 4. It's a very short scene. It would be easy to skip over it, but there are some things that are worth noting, and I would never forgive myself if you got an extract from this scene and I haven't taught it to you. So because I accidentally set you work during half term, you've had an easy week this week, and this is quite a light week in terms of the amount of work that you're going to have to do. Okay, so if you haven't already done so, just as we normally do, you need to pause the video and read through the scene. It won't take you long, it's very brief, but I will assume that you have understood it through the rest of the video. Okay. Right, so let's summarise what we've just read. So the scene takes place a little bit after Act 2, Scene 3, but it's still the same day. So Macbeth murders Duncan in the middle of the night. Macduff arrives in the early hours of the morning when it's still dark and discovers Duncan's body. And a few hours have passed. The sun's come up, and now we're at this point in the scene. And Ross, who, if you remember, is one of the thanes in Scotland, he's one of the noblemen, is taking a stroll outside of Macbeth's castle, and he meets an old man, and they have a brief conversation about all the strange things that have been going on over the last few days. So as they're having that conversation, Macduff arrives, and they have a brief three-way conversation about who might be responsible and if there's any more news. And Macduff says that the guards have, it would seem, have been paid to murder Duncan, and because Malcolm and Donalbain have run away, it looks like the guards were employed by Duncan's sons, and so it looks like Malcolm and Donalbain are guilty. So Macduff says that Macbeth is next in line and has gone off to Scone to be crowned. Now I know that looks like scone, this word here, but it's pronounced Scone. It's a real place in Scotland, and it's like the seat of power. It's traditionally where kings go to be crowned. So at this point, towards the end of the scene, Ross leaves and goes off to witness the coronation. He heads off to Scone. But Macduff says that he's not going to go, and he's going to go back home to Fife, and he won't witness Macbeth being crowned. And so off they all go. Okay, so let's look at these this scene bit by bit. I'm just going to move my face because I'm over the top of some of the annotations. Okay. Hello. Right, so first of all, you get the old man talking. So we've just got Ross and the old man on stage at this point. And the old man states that he's 70. That's 70 years old. A score is 20, so he's 70. And this is a significant age because it's what the Bible defines as a full life. This is a full measure of life. And so this man's been alive a long time. 70 was quite a ripe old age at this point in history. Remember, it's written in 1606, but Macbeth was around in the 12 or 1300s. So at this point in time, 70 is quite an old age. And he says that he remembers his life very well. He's got a good memory. Now, he says that in all of the time that he's been alive, he's never experienced anything as horrendous as the events of the last few days, and particularly the night that has just passed. Now, Shakespeare is using the old man here as a dramatic device to show the significance of the murder. Nothing like this has occurred in a lifetime, in a whole generation. And look at the way the old man describes the night. He says it's a sore night, and it's put other things that seem significant into the shade. It has made trifles of, made insignificant other important things that have happened. So the old man here, he doesn't appear again, he's only in this scene. He's used as a dramatic device to show how significant this murder is. Okay, so Ross then starts pointing out some of the things that have happened that are really peculiar. And the first thing he points out is that it's daytime, but it's dark. So even though it's meant to be daylight, the sun can't shine. And he uses a metaphor here, or a metaphor. He describes the sun as a travelling lamp. So the sun moving across the sky, is it travelling, and it's their light. And he says that it's so dark that the night is strangling the sun. Now, what this tells us is that the boundaries between day and night have been blurred since Duncan's murder. And I've just put the quote there again for you. Fair is foul and foul is fair. It's where we started this play, and it's that theme that keeps running all the way through. So again, day is night, and everything's been jumbled up. Okay, so he also uses a metaphor of death and life, and he's linking light with life and darkness with death. So he talks about the sun being entombed, or the earth being entombed, when light should be on it. And so again, we've got the boundaries of day and night being blurred, but we've also got the boundaries between life and death being blurred here. What should be life, or what should be alive, is dead. And so again, we've got that reference to fair is foul and foul is fair. And the old man, my face is over the character name there. This is the old man. He notices how unnatural all of this is. And so we've got the development of the theme of the supernatural that's been running all the way through the play. The old man states that this is not natural. The daytime being dark is unnatural. But then he goes on to talk about some other unnatural things that he's witnessed or heard about. And the first one he mentions is to do with birds, but he makes the connection for us that the unnatural events that are happening are connected to the unnatural killing of a king. So the old man makes that connection for us. Now, what that shows us is that even ordinary people can see how significant and how evil and corrupt the murder of Duncan is. It's already public knowledge, it's out there in Scottish society, and ordinary people can see that something is deeply wrong with what has happened. So his image is a falcon, and he says that on last Tuesday, we don't know what day this is, but a few days ago, let's assume, a falcon towering in her pride of place was by a mousing owl hawked at and killed. So he's basically saying that he witnessed a falcon right at the top of its flight, just about as it's about to plummet down and capture its prey, was taken out by an ordinary owl. And so this is actually more significant than it appears. So if we talk about the context briefly, in medieval hawking, so this is like falconry that went through from medieval times right through Elizabethan and Jacobean times, different birds of prey were allotted to different people of different status in society, and the falcon was the king's bird. If you were a king, you were allowed a falcon. If you weren't a king, you weren't allowed a falcon. There was another bird of prey that you were allocated, but you couldn't have a falcon. And so the image here is that the king, the falcon, was killed by an ordinary bird, the owl. And so just like Macbeth's murder of Duncan, Duncan the king was murdered by an ordinary man. Although we know it's Macbeth, they all think it's the guards. And so what we've got here is that the natural hierarchy now has been thrown into chaos. So we've had life and death day and night, but we've seen the natural hierarchy in nature has been upset and messed about with by the murder of Duncan. So the next thing they talk about is probably the most disturbing thing that they discuss. So Ross says that Duncan's horses, he doesn't say when, we can assume it was overnight or that morning. Duncan's horses have gone mad and broken out of their stalls and have eaten each other, which is fairly gross, to be honest. And so we've got natural characteristics of animals being overturned. Horses are herbivores, they only eat vegetables, and they are trained to be in service to human beings. These are well trained, and actually, if you look at the language here, you've got minions of their race. Now, this means that these were the best horses of their kind. And look at all the language here. We've got broke, flung, turned wild, contending, war. And so we've got lots of language that is full of conflict here. And so, although the horses were the best in their class, they've rebelled against their master, Duncan, and in doing that, they've destroyed themselves. And so, their act of rebellion has brought about self-destruction. And so, hidden in this little section is another metaphor for Macbeth's actions, and a little bit of foreshadowing as well that this is going to end badly for him. His act of rebellion and defiance, his war making almost, will bring about his ruin. Okay, so at this point, Macduff comes in, and Ross greets him in quite a friendly way and asks for more news. How goes the world, sir, now? So what's happening? And look at Macduff's response and think about what we looked at last week in terms of Act 2, Scene 3, how Macduff was a man of the people and he gave that time to the porter and chatted with him and had a joke with him. We've got a very different Macduff here. So when Ross asks him, is what's going on, Macduff answers in almost quite a sullen or sarcastic way. He says, why can't you see for yourself? And so we could either think that Macduff was being fake in the previous scene, or perhaps actually he's got other things on his mind. He is troubled. We get a really clear sense of Macduff's mood here. It's obvious to him and to everybody that Scotland is in disarray, and it should be obvious. He's not in the mood for small talk and chit chat. And this carries on in his tone all the way through the next section, because if you go back to Act 2, Scene 3 and think about how chatty he was, here he's almost monosyllabic. He's very brief in his responses, and his words are almost always one syllable, unless he's using names. So Ross asks if they know any more about who did it, and here we've got Macduff replying in a monosyllabic way, those that Macbeth has killed. So he's talking about the guards. Now he's stating here what is obviously the case, but the tone, if you look at it through this section, suggests that he might think something different. So he states the obvious, but his tone suggests that there is more to what's going on than meets the eye. Now, you need to contextualize this in the scene, because everybody is suspicious of everybody else. There is a killer amongst them, and no one knows who they can trust and who they can't. And so perhaps that is why Macduff is so sort of short and reserved and brief in his responses. Ross asks what excuse they've given, and Macduff, if we look at this next section, says that they were paid. Suborned means paid, like hired. They were hired killers. And again, he states what appears to be true. He says Malcolm and Donalbain have run away and fled, which puts on them the suspicion of the deed. And the question we need to keep asking ourselves is, does he believe this version of events? This is what he says is true. He's saying, remember, he started off by saying, can't you see for yourself what's going on? So he states what's obviously the case. But my view is, you could disagree with me if you want to. You've got to be able to back yourself up, though. My view is that Macduff knows that something's not right, and I think he already knows who he suspects. Now, Ross again talks about, well, he states that with Malcolm and Donalbain gone, Macbeth is the next in line to the throne. And I just wanted to throw a question in here that addresses the fact that Macbeth and Lady Macbeth didn't plan for Malcolm and Donalbain running away. That wasn't in the plan at all. And I wonder what they'd have done if Malcolm and Donalbain hadn't left. Would it have been enough that the guards appeared guilty, or what? Because if Malcolm hadn't run away, Malcolm had been named Prince of Northumberland, and so would have been the next in line. So killing Duncan wouldn't have been enough to get the crown for Macbeth. And so I wonder, it's something to think about. In a way, it will help you to get to know the characters. The more you understand about what's motivating them and how they're behaving, the better your responses in an exam would be. What would Macbeth have done if Malcolm and Donalbain had stayed? Would he have killed them too? Or would he have accepted that they'd messed up and not taken them into account? Perhaps they overlooked it because they got so carried away with the idea of killing the king and didn't really think about what would happen next. So Ross points out that Macbeth is the next in line, and then quite surprisingly, Macduff says that Macbeth has already gone off to be crowned. And if we remember that this is only a few hours after the discovery of Duncan's body, that's quite surprising speed for Macduff to have organised a coronation. Ross asks where Duncan's body is, and we also discover that Duncan's body has already been taken away too. So this is an incredible rate of progress through the morning, considering everybody's reeling with the shock of the murder of the king. So what we need to think about again is Macduff's tone. Is he surprised by the speed of events, or is he not? And what does that tell us? Now, my view, again, you can disagree with me if you can justify it. My view is that he isn't surprised at all. And I think that it's this little bit that gives away Macduff's suspicions. And that is cemented in the next few lines. So what we've got here is that things have happened really quickly that show Macbeth is very keen to get that crown on his head and be securely in place as king before Malcolm and Donalbain can appear and throw spanners into the works. So what comes next might be the most telling line in this scene. Ross says he asks Macduff if Macduff is going to go off to Scone to see the coronation, and Macduff says that he isn't. He's going to go home. Now, Ross is going to go off to Scone. He's going to go to the coronation, but Macduff isn't. Now, Macduff is a thane. He's a nobleman in Scotland, like Ross, like Macbeth was. And it's an expectation on him that he would be at the coronation. And so him not going is a really significant choice on Macduff's part. And I think that reveals the fact that he doesn't think Macbeth is a legitimate king. He knows that Malcolm is, but Malcolm's nowhere in sight. And I think it shows that he does not believe that Malcolm killed his father. So we need to think about what Macduff's refusal to go to the coronation reveals to the audience. Shakespeare's deliberately put that little exchange in there. We need to take note of it. Okay, almost at the end of the scene. So Ross says, well, I'm going to go to Scone. And Macduff says, and this is where he gets a little bit unguarded, I think, towards the end of this scene. He says, well, may you see things well done there. And again, his tone is loaded with sarcasm. He hopes that the coronation will be done well, which implies that it won't be, that something isn't right. And then he uses this really telling metaphor, and I've highlighted it in green because it's one of those quotes that's worth learning off by heart. He says, lest our old robes sit easier than our new. And he's suggesting here that Macbeth's reign as King of Scotland won't be good. And this is a metaphor that suggests that the new king will be inferior and his reign far less comfortable and easy than Duncans was. And so that's Macduff pretty much saying what he thinks of Macbeth as King of Scotland. He's not a fan at all. So at this point, they say their goodbyes. Ross is going off to Scone, Macduff is going off to Fife, and the old man is going wherever he is off to. And as he leaves, he gets the last line in this scene, and he ends the scene with a prayer for peace. And so we return back to the beginning of this scene where they were talking about all the conflict in Scotland, and he finishes the scene with a request, a plea, a prayer for God's blessing. Benison means blessing. And he says, God's blessing on you, Ross and Macduff, and on anyone that will make good out of bad and friends out of foes. So anyone that is going to work to put things right and turn things for good, the old man prays for God's blessing on them, because it suggests that all three of them know that something isn't right and somebody needs to stand up for justice and righteousness in this awful situation. So that's the end of the scene. So what's important? What do we need to notice with Act 2, Scene 4? First of all, it's worth noting that news has spread about Duncan's murder very, very quickly. The old man knows about it, and people are starting to put two and two together and noticing that something very wrong has happened. So it's public knowledge. That's the first thing we need to notice. We also need to notice that the murder of Duncan has disturbed the natural order of the world, and we did talk about that a little bit in Act 2, Scene 3, but it's developed much more fully in this little scene. We can also note that the plan appears to have worked. The guards have been blamed, and that Malcolm and Donalbain's flight away from Dunsinane has caused them to be suspects. I'll just move my face again up here so you can read it. There we go. So they are now suspects. Macbeth has become king already, just a matter of hours after the death of Duncan. And Macduff, this is probably the most important thing in this scene, Macduff senses that there is more going on than meets the eye. The evidence doesn't speak for itself. And so what we've got is this growing sense that Macduff is the bringer of justice. He's going to be the one to put it right. And so Act 2, Scene 4 continues to develop that sense of Macduff being a good man, a man that stands up for what's right. And his boycott of the coronation tells us that he is not on Macbeth's side. In fact, he probably thinks that Macbeth is the murderer. He clearly had the most to gain. Right, so that's it. What are your response to us then? 2 questions this week. First of all, how does Shakespeare reveal Macduff's suspicions about the events of the previous night? So again, the focus of the question is Shakespeare, not Macduff. So we need to look at what Shakespeare is doing in this scene to show us that Macduff is suspicious. And second question, how does Shakespeare reveal the effect of Duncan's murder on the world? So that's where you can talk about the unnatural and the supernatural. And if you want to push yourself a little bit and make links with previous scenes or things that happen later, that would be a really good way of extending your answer and increasing your marks in an exam situation. So the more links you can make, the better. So look forward to seeing what you come up with. Look forward to hearing from you. If you're finding these videos helpful, I do really like getting messages from you because I miss you. It's a really peculiar situation, and being a teacher without being able to be in a classroom with students isn't a great deal of fun. So your messages are some of the most fun I get during my day. It's a very sad life. Okay, so do feel free to message me if you've got any questions. I do check Frog almost every day, so if you've got any questions, drop me a line and I'll respond as quickly as I can. Okay, so that's it for this week, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye.